I just wanted to give you a little overview of the little photo up there. This was actually done by the group on the final day, our celebration day. They came back and they baked the cupcakes, and they used all the core concepts out of the group. So this little photo with the cupcakes is how the group celebrated the end of Wise Choices. So Wise Choices, partners in Wise Choices. So as you know, part of Partners in Recovery's mandate is to do some systems reform. So the Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital, at that stage it was Meg, who was the Service Integration Coordinator, came to Partners in Recovery Communify with the concept of we need better support for clients with personality vulnerabilities. How are we going to do it? So we decided to look at some partnerships, and that was with Communify, RBH, and then of course Spectrum. We use Spectrum in Victoria's Wise Choices program. As you can see, that picture is just our little advertising leaflet of our first group that we ran. And what was nice about Wise Choices, it was already developed by very competent psychologists and psychiatrists that work at Spectrum, and they had done a pilot study themselves and a quick sort of study around the statistics and the outcomes, and we felt very confident using Wise Choices. So what is the program about? So it's about the core concepts, as you could see in that first slide around the cupcakes, the core concepts. So it's similar to some of the DBT concepts, but if you're all familiar with acceptance and commitment therapy, so Wise Choices completely based on acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness, acceptance, values, working with people's values, people who are, we understand that people with personality vulnerabilities have those difficulties around interpersonal skills, feeling and presenting in the moment. They really struggle with emotional regulating within the moment. So Wise Choicement is a is a group treatment. And like I said beforehand, it was a successful in a randomized controlled trial comparing 12 sessions of this acceptance and commitment group therapy. And this was compared with treatment as usual and treatment as usual alone. So that means it's would be your Wise Choices with your clinical support or with your psychological support or any of the other supports that those consumers might have in place. The authors of Wise Choices, Jane Morton and Leanne Shaw, have over 10 years experience in providing specialist treatment at Spectrum in Victoria. And interesting, I've just been to the National Conference for Feature BPD, What Works, a statewide conference, and they were featured there, and some of their studies came out. So this resource is readily available on the Spectrum website, so but I'll go in a little bit more about it. So just a quick, this is just a snapshot of what the course looks like. We all know, if you're familiar with acceptance and commitment therapy, we've all heard about the passengers on the bus, which is those thoughts that hook us and it makes us feel really bad about ourselves, but it's learning those skills to deal with those defeating thoughts. Mindfulness, core, just like DBT, a very core concept of Wise Choices. And like I said, it was developed by Spectrum, and our partners, which is Communify, Queensland Health, RBH, and then, of course, Partners in Recovery's flexible funding that's paying for this at the moment. So why did we choose to do Wise Choices? So when Meg first started speaking to us about it, we realized that there's definitely a gap or even a block in the system supporting clients with personality vulnerabilities. And there are criteria issues when a client enters into the mental health system. We know that most of these clients that are managed by mental health need to be in acute stage. Some of our clients aren't that acute, but they are the clients who, what we say, turn and burn through through our agencies. They're the ones who show up at PEC, they're the ones at ED over the weekend, who have severe suicidal ideation, and really that interpersonal conflicts really stops a lot of these clients from staying engaged with services. We also looked at the resources that mental health system can offer. We all know the mental health system offers the DBT program, which is a fantastic program, but there's also a limited resource. Our clients sometimes are not acute enough to get in. Some of our clients aren't ready to commit for a whole year. So wise choices, we thought, would sit alongside DBT. Get clients ready maybe for DBT, or by the time they're supposed to go into DBT, some of those skills that they've learned, they've managed their mental health. So by no means are we saying DBT is out the water, it's not good enough. What we're saying is wise choices, it's a partner to DBT. We all know the stigma around treatment, even within our mental health systems. We hear the comments, oh, that's a borderline, can't deal with them, they're difficult, too hard basket. So we know that it's really hard in the mental health system. We know that the clinical teams have got a huge caseload and they need to do clinical work. So for them to start care coordinating these clients are really, really a hard ask. So we looked at what can we do to create an environment where the stigma and the treatment is not as debilitating, that we can create an environment where these clients can feel accepted for who they are. We also know that there's huge co-occurring issues around people with mental health on that spectrum of personality issues. As those little stats show, that 74% of clients, for instance, diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, at least have one co-occurring for another personality disorder on axis 2, and the same for axis 1. So the rates, and the conference also reiterated that it's between 1 and 2% of our population has got a personality disorder. And their suicide rate is really high. It's the same as people with schizophrenia. So that is why we started having these conversations. So what were the outcomes we were hoping for? So we did what we call a local partnership agreement with RBH, and we sat down and we looked at what can we actually achieve or try and achieve here. So those are just some of that. I don't want to read through all of it. So it's that access appropriate clinical and community-based supports. And if we look at the clinical guidelines, that's in 2013 clinical guidelines from the Queensland government, we all know that treating people with personality disorders is not done in a hospital setting. It's not the best outcome. It's for when it's acute, but we don't want admissions to be, this is the way we treat it. So we really wanted to look at community-based interventions around recovery, receiving those recovery goals. We wanted to look at the barriers, and like I've mentioned already, we looked at the barriers, the lack of services, the lack of clinicians who actually really want to work with clients, and it is really around specificness and being specific and structured working with clients. Like I also said, provide a complementary alternative program to DBT, provide an additional avenue of treatment. So we were looking at Wise Choices has got a 10-week first phase, and we wanted to look at especially those consumers in mental health that present at PEC, that are currently engaged in short-term case management, or even those who, when they come into the service, who aren't case managed, that there is another place for them to go. And we looked from a partisan recovery point of view, we also still wanted to be eligible the way we work as partisan recovery. So that looks at the care coordination. Who are those key stakeholders? The clinical guidelines also bring out it's really, really important that there's one specific worker that engages with clients with personality vulnerabilities, and that is what PIR does. We are that one stop kind of place where the client can come. So the end goal is once again to have that sustainable alternative support embedded within the NGO sector. Another part of this was also education. So every time we run Wise Choices, we wanted a new facilitator to join to be part of this training. So that's embedding it in the system, saying Wise Choices, it's really easy to run. If you have a basic understanding of acceptance and commitment therapy, the way it's set out, it is really self-explanatory, and we running it with Communify's mental health social worker. Like I say, anyone who's interested in co-facilitating can be trained in that. So that's basically our outcomes as outlined in our local partnership agreement. So what outcomes did we get? So we have run our first group. So just around, this is not statistically sort of significant. It's a really small sample group. So we had 6 participants. The highlights for us were that for the 10 sessions, they were there. We might have had 1 or 2 missing because we've had some during the group, obviously. It's really hard work. A lot of these clients deal with stuff they've never dealt with before, so we've had to call the ambulance a couple of times because things got a little bit out of sorts, but the clients kept coming back. So we had no drop-offs at all, which was really, really great. If you look at clients with personality vulnerabilities who do not connect, who do have huge trust issues. So for me, if I even don't look at any of the other data, was a really huge outcome for us. So on a ratings scale, we did the Wise Choices have got like a group evaluation for the 10 weeks. 1 to 10, 10 being the best. We had a 7.5 average score there of clients saying, I really loved it. Session 4, all our clients battled with session 4. That's when they realized that all these skills aren't magical. And I spoke to the Wise Choices facilitators who did this, and they actually concurred and says, yes, session 4 is where all the clients go, get me out of here. This is not magical. But they came back. I had a Wise Choices, Fiona, Jane, and Leanne suggested that I use just 3 basic scores, which are measuring tools, which was the DAS, the depression anxiety, BEST, which is around thoughts and feelings that they use for people with borderline personality disorders. And then I just did a little questionnaire, little soft outcomes around your engagement with acute mental health services. So roughly 83% demonstrated a collective improvement across all those measurements, specifically in depression. The depression in the DAS went down, and in the BEST was the thoughts and feelings. So that's really good to know. There were scores that went up, yes, because a lot of our clients or consumers did speak about things that were quite distressing for them. One of the participants, while they were there, had quite a life-changing realization, and it was really, really hard for her. But part of that realization was that she was in a group that she felt really, really well supported was to actually deal with that life trauma. Anecdotal data, which is my favorite as a social worker. The group, these are just some of the notes that the clients made for us. The group gave me a reason to leave the house. Even though it was hard, I was determined to go each week. Wise Choice helped me not to present at hospital, and I think that is one outcome we were really looking for. It gives me a reason to get out of bed again, puts a smile on my face, and Wise Choices has really helped change how I think about the feelings and thoughts. Now, this will hopefully turn. These are just some consumer comments, but unfortunately it's a little bit soft, so I'm really hoping that you guys can hear this. Just to mention, each of these group participants did give me permission to share their stories, so I hope you can hear what that is. Choices participants, and it's been here from the word go. Hey Rebecca, you've stuck it out.
Yes. 10 weeks.
10 weeks. Can you give me just a brief overview of how you found the group in general?
Yeah, I've loved it, absolutely loved it, and both the facilitators have been fantastic, and I think one of the biggest thing with the facilitators is that they also shared personal experiences on some issues, and how they dealt with it, in a wise, choicely manner. That really helped to make them feel more human. To continue to come for the whole 10 weeks, that has been a big thing. Because there have been some weeks that have been very brutally confronting for myself, and I've broken down, but I've dealt with it and realised that it really, the whole mindfulness and looking at my values and goals in life is what I really am lacking, and that what I'm learning from the course is helping me, and it's I feel comfortable and safe around the people to learn. GPs don't have the time to sit and go through things with you about your actual specific thoughts and your specific feelings, and when you're having them, and that you're avoiding things instead of coming to a choice point and starting to change them yourself. And I think it's fantastic.
Right. And anything you like, if you look at social supports, peer supports, are you taking any relationships with you?
Most definitely. I have made a friend for life, and it's amazing when we talk to each other how many similarities we have with our thoughts and our feelings, even though we have very different illnesses. And I think that there's quite a few people who I could see myself having good friendships.
Because you're really keen on a whole.
The next consumer is a young girl that didn't want to show her face, and there's huge struggles for her around eating and hospitalisation. So this was actually very big for her to have this conversation with me on tape.
Stands out for you that really helped?
Oh, okay. I remember the week that, I think it was early on in the group too, but Heidi showed us the video of the bus and the passengers on the bus. And it was actually really lame. The video, it was so cheesy. But to be able to know that, like, the passengers or our thoughts were going to always be there and ride along with us or whatever, but we don't have to, like, take to heart what they were saying. It was, we could listen to it, but we didn't have to actually listen to what they were saying. We could just, it could be background noise or something.
Can kick them off the bus.
But it was like the part that stood out so much to me, and I think about it like every day, that if, like, I have these bad thoughts in my head, that they don't always have to get me down more or make things worse. It can still be a good day if it starts bad.
Would this be a kind of group that you would do again?
Yes, I enjoyed the group so much that I really, I would do it again. I would recommend anyone doing it. I remember talking to my friends when I was doing it and saying, like, I wish they could do it, or I want to bring them along, or something like that.
Because this wasn't always easy for you, Brie.
No.
It's a struggle, and it's not. It doesn't come easy.
No.
But you were very brave doing the group at times when you weren't feeling the greatest. With the support you've got now from Partners in Recovery, do you think that there's a little bit of, do you feel you can manage a little bit better with all the things we've got planned, or trying to connect with you?
So much more supported since becoming part of, like, Partners in Recovery. Like, I feel like I've always had people, like, helping me, but I actually feel like you guys really want to help me out, and I'm not by myself, and I didn't feel like that before.
So just, and I think when we looked at the data, and if we looked at the conversation that we were having, is that whatever the consumers, clients said to us, to me reiterated that it was really in line with the clinical guidelines. So treatment should be provided by community-based mental health, coming to a place they really liked coming to. We ran it from the PIR office in Spring Hill. They found it very safe and non-intimidating, not clinical. So community mental health-based interventions for them was definitely the more sustainable option. Admission should not be used as a standard treatment unless it's acute. One care coordinator, which the feedback from the consumers and the facilitators were that it was good, although Partners in Recovery don't deliver services. At the beginning of the group, I was always there because those clients were still on our caseload. So we had time to have conversations with them about care coordinating, looking at their other services. So they had a contact point before the group to run things by us. So that was really a very critical part, not just for the facilitators, but for the consumers as well. And that, as the clinical guidelines say, a specialised intervention service is really what we're looking at, and we're hoping that Wise Choices can be that. So what's next? We're hoping to pool more of our flexible funding, because Partners in Recovery's flexible funding is funding this at the moment. So we've got permission from Medicare Local to pool some of our flexible funding to run this group. We are running the second group of phase 1. They're starting on the 14th of October. Then we're going to have phase 2, which really deals a lot with relationships with participants from both phases. We're looking at getting more comprehensive data to put together, really looking at embedding Wise Choices in the system, and we've been in conversation with other regions. So we're looking at the PIR up at the Prince Charles catchment area for them to start coordinating that and putting this Wise Choices in, and hopefully also Caboolture and Red Cap area. Train more facilitators. Like I said, they've developed this so that it's easy enough for people who have got a good psychological understanding of ACT to be able to deliver it. So we will more than welcome to sit in and co-facilitate and train on Wise Choices. More partnerships across the regions, and finding Wise Choices a permanent home in the community mental health. How we're going to do that, we don't know, but we're looking at alternatives. So that's just the details for North Brisbane Partners in Recovery. If anyone still wanted to refer clients to the next group, you can do it directly through to the Communify Partners in Recovery. And that's it from Wise Choices. Thank you.